When you think of fear in football, you think of pain. Not the kind that fades when the game ends, the kind that lingers in the bones, the memory. Yes, every era has its monsters, but few ever walk the field like this man. In a league built around courage, he became the reason courage was tested. He wasn't a villain. He wasn't a hero. He was something in between, the embodiment of raw, controlled violence. Meet the most ruthless linebacker of all time, Greg Lloyd. In the late 1980s, every quarterback knew his name. Greg Lloyd, the linebacker who brought violence to the game and fear to anyone who dared cross his line. He wasn't just a hitter, he was a hunter. He once separated Dan Marino's shoulder. He once hit Brett Favre so hard that the quarterback saw stars for days. When Lloyd came off the edge, helmets rattled, stadiums fell silent, and entire sidelines held their breath. Between 1994 and 1995, he led the NFL in forced fumbles, 2 straight years of ripping the ball, and sometimes bones from his opponents. By the time the dust settled, Lloyd was a 5-time Pro Bowler, the enforcer of Bill Cowher's 3-4 defense, and the heartbeat of the Pittsburgh Steelers' resurgence. Greg Lloyd didn't just play linebacker. He redefined what it meant to be one. Greg Leonard Lloyd Sr. was born in Miami, Florida on May 26, 1965. He never knew his father. His single mother raised 9 children alone, until one day she packed 6 of them into a car and drove north to Georgia. Fort Valley became home, a small, humid town with more dust than dreams. There, Aunt Bertha May Rumpf took in 10 children inside a cramped 2-bedroom apartment. 10 beds? No. Just space on the floor. Lloyd's childhood was built on scarcity and grit. In 7th grade, he had only 2 sets of clothes, one for the first 3 days of the week, one for the last 2. He learned early what it meant to be humbled. He learned to fight when mocked. When kids teased him, he fought back, always. Even as a boy, Lloyd's energy felt dangerous. His first coach, a pastor named Billy Powell, learned that the hard way. During one practice, Powell asked his young players to tackle him one at a time. 6-year-old Greg Lloyd charged and dropped them flat. It was no accident, it was instinct. Aunt Bertha kept him disciplined with an extension cord when he crossed the line, but nothing could restrain the fire inside him. That anger, that drive, would one day fuel one of the most feared linebackers in NFL history. At Peach County High School, Lloyd finally found a place where aggression was rewarded. He lined up at fullback and linebacker for the Trojans. Every snap was a war, every play personal. During one game, he hit a quarterback so hard that the player's leg snapped. Officials ejected Lloyd instantly, but the legend had already started. Some saw a menace, others saw a rising star. In the middle of it all, Lloyd met Rhonda Simmons, a quiet girl from the Midwest in his trigonometry class. They would marry 8 years later, long after Lloyd had become a name feared across the NFL. He stayed in Fort Valley for college, walking into a small historically black university with nothing but raw talent and unbreakable will. That school, Fort Valley State, would change his life. Fort Valley State University wasn't Alabama or Michigan, wasn't even Division I, but for Greg Lloyd, it was the proving ground. He studied electrical engineering, he joined the Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity, and on the field, he was a force no one could contain. His head coach Doug Porter saw it right away. Lloyd didn't understand the meaning of non-contact drills. He went full speed, even in practice. Porter sometimes had to pull him out just to protect the others. He became the kind of leader who didn't need to shout to command respect. When teammates slacked off, he got in their faces. No one argued, everyone listened. He won 3 straight defensive MVPs in the Southern Intercollegiate Athletic Conference. By his senior year, he was the SIAC Player of the Year and a Sheridan All-American. He didn't have NFL scouts lining up, no combine invite, no spotlight, but he didn't need it, because Greg Lloyd wasn't chasing attention, he was chasing proof. Lloyd knew the names that came before him: Jerry Rice, Walter Payton, players from historically black colleges who built greatness from obscurity. He wanted to be next. He played with something deeper than ambition. It was resentment sharpened into focus. In 1987, after his college career ended, Lloyd played in the Heritage Bowl, a showcase for HBCU talent. On a grainy videotape, Pittsburgh Steelers scouts saw him explode through blockers, intercept a pass, and flatten anyone in his path. That tape changed everything. Tim Donahoe, one of the Steelers' scouts, drove 2.5 hours to Fort Valley to see him up close. Lloyd didn't disappoint. He dominated the workout, raw and relentless. He wasn't polished, he wasn't safe, but he was powerful, exactly the kind of chaos Pittsburgh loved. The Steelers took a chance. In return, Lloyd gave them something they couldn't teach: controlled fury. When Greg Lloyd arrived in Pittsburgh, the city was still chasing the ghost of the steel curtain. The glory years were gone. The defense needed a soul again. Lloyd gave it one. Under Bill Cowher's new system, he became the centerpiece, a 3-4 linebacker who hit like a sledgehammer and moved like a predator. His number 95 became a warning sign. Quarterbacks started counting his shadow before the snap. Offensive linemen whispered his name in film rooms. Receivers prayed not to cross the middle. He didn't play dirty, he played violently clean. Every tackle was personal, every hit a message. He was nothing but a living monster. Once Lloyd's story almost ended before it began. In his rookie camp of 1987, he tore the ligaments in his right knee. Season over. He trained, rebuilt, and fought his way back, only to injure his left knee the next year. 2 years gone, 2 seasons wasted. For most players, that would have been the end. For Greg Lloyd, it was the ignition. He returned in 1989 like a loaded gun. In his first real NFL game, he punched Denver Broncos backup quarterback Gary Kubiak and got ejected. That was the first glimpse of what was coming, a linebacker who didn't believe in playing nice. From there, Lloyd missed only 3 games in 7 seasons. He punished anyone who came across his zone. Quarterbacks, running backs, even fullbacks. No one was safe. When Lloyd first walked into the Steelers facility,
obviously. So, when I got here, it was odd. The first person I met was Joe Green. And it wasn't until I actually started.
First man he met was Mean Joe Green, the symbol of Pittsburgh toughness. In that moment, the young rookie looked at the man who once starred in a Coke commercial and thought of how far that felt from where he stood. Green was a legend. Lloyd was a long shot. But head coach Chuck Noll saw something immediately. He told offensive lineman John Kolb quietly during practice, "That kid right there, number 95, he's gonna surprise everyone." He did more than that. He reshaped the Steelers' defense. By the early 1990s, Pittsburgh's defense had a name that struck fear across the league: Blitzburg. Greg Lloyd, Rod Woodson, and Carnell Lake formed its spine. Together they built something brutal and beautiful, a defense that didn't just play football, it punished. At 6 foot 2 inches and 226 pounds, Lloyd was considered small for a linebacker. Numbers didn't matter. He could bench press 470 pounds, run a 4.52 second 40-yard dash, shatter any illusion of safety a quarterback had. He was also a black belt in Taekwondo, a discipline that taught him precision, balance, and how to strike with controlled rage. Off the field, he became an instructor. On it, he was the teacher of pain. Steelers owner Dan Rooney once said Lloyd could have fit in perfectly with the steel curtain defense of the 1970s. This is a compliment reserved for legends. And Lloyd embraced that legacy. He wore an undershirt under his gear that said it all: "I wasn't hired for my disposition." In December 1989, Lloyd leveled Jets quarterback Pat Ryan. 2 years later, he crushed Seahawks QB Dave Craig with a late hit so vicious that Joe Namath condemned it live. Lloyd didn't care. He shot back through the press. Namath could, as he put it, go to hell. That was Greg Lloyd. Raw, defiant, fearless. And behind that rage was dominance. Between 1989 and 1995, the Steelers averaged 10 wins a year. Lloyd was at the heart of every battle: 640 tackles, 48.5 sacks, 10 interceptions, 29 forced fumbles, and 11 recoveries. He led the league in forced fumbles in consecutive years. He was named to 5 straight Pro Bowls, 3 times an All-Pro. Every hit was a statement, every game a war. By the mid-1990s, the NFL had begun to change. New rules protected quarterbacks, softened hits, slowed defenses. Lloyd hated it. He told reporters bluntly that football was violent, and it should stay that way. He wasn't built for safe football, he was built for chaos. At an autograph session in 1994, a teenage fan nervously approached him, asking him to take down Cleveland's quarterback Vinny Testaverde that Sunday. Lloyd didn't smile. He just said, "You don't have to worry about that, kid." That Sunday, he delivered. The Steelers won 17-7. Kevin Green, another feared linebacker who sat beside him that day, just shook his head and laughed. Because when Greg Lloyd said something, he meant it. Lloyd's peak was defined not just by stats, but by aura. He was everywhere, screaming, chasing, destroying. He led huddles with fire in his eyes and venom in his voice. His teammates fed off him. His opponents dreaded him. And when the Steelers reached the AFC Championship game in 1995, it was Lloyd's energy that carried them through. After Pittsburgh's 2016 win over the Colts, the locker room exploded in celebration. Cameras rolled as Lloyd handed the AFC trophy to owner Dan Rooney. What he said was raw, unfiltered, and unforgettable. He promised to bring it back with the fucking Super Bowl alongside it. It was pure emotion, words of a man who had clawed his way up from injuries, doubt, and pain. They didn't win that Super Bowl. Dallas took it 27-17, but Lloyd had already written his name into Pittsburgh's lore. In 1996, during a preseason game, Green Bay Packers quarterback Brett Favre dropped back to pass and never saw Greg Lloyd coming. The hit was brutal. Favre went down hard, motionless for a second that felt like forever. Teammate Fred McAfee later said it was like watching someone step on a landmine. For days, Favre woke up sore, muttering Lloyd's name every morning. The hit became infamous, whispered about in NFL circles. Rumors even spread that it might have sparked Favre's dependence on painkillers later in his career. The NFL fined Lloyd $12,000, the biggest penalty of its kind at the time. He didn't apologize. He didn't care. He played one way, the only way he knew. By now, the legend had grown. At Three Rivers Stadium, a sign appeared in the stands, "Avoid Lloyd." Quarterbacks tried. They failed. Jim Harbaugh, the Colts QB who faced Lloyd in that 1995 title game, later admitted that Greg Lloyd was the only player he truly feared and respected. Because Lloyd wasn't dirty, he was dangerous. Even through pain, he kept playing. Knee injuries, he fought through it all. But by 1996, the body began to fail the mind. He missed 15 games that season, then 4 more in 1997 with a staph infection. The Steelers kept winning, the magic faded. After the 1997 season, Lloyd left Pittsburgh, signed with the Carolina Panthers for one final year. When Greg Lloyd retired in 1998, he left behind a record that spoke louder than any words. 791 tackles, 54.5 sacks, 35 forced fumbles, 11 interceptions. But more than that, he left behind a reputation that few in NFL history could match. Dan Rooney once said Lloyd could have played in any era, 1938 or 1998, because real football didn't care about rules or ratings, cared about heart, grit, and fury. And Greg Lloyd had all three in excess. After football, Lloyd stepped away from the chaos. He settled in Pittsburgh with his wife Stephanie and their children Greg Jr., James, and Tiana. His son followed in his footsteps, playing linebacker at UConn, wearing the same number 95. But retirement did soften him. 2013, when asked about the modern NFL, Lloyd's tone was sharp. He said players today didn't study or care like they used to. They left practice early. They wanted the fame without the grind. In 2018, decades after the cheers had faded, Greg Lloyd's name returned to headlines for the wrong reasons. Greg Lloyd will always be remembered as more than just a linebacker. He was a symbol of a time when football was unfiltered, when defenders didn't hesitate, when violence wasn't a penalty, but a play style. His teammates revered him. His opponents dreaded him. He didn't chase fame, didn't play for applause. He played for respect, the kind that's earned one bone-crunching tackle at a time. When fans of the old Steelers talk about toughness, his name always surfaces. Because Greg Lloyd wasn't just tough, he was ruthless. He lived by a creed few could handle. Hit first, hit hard, and never apologize. The kind of player who could make stadiums roar, quarterbacks tremble, and fans remember. And long after the games ended, long after the bruises healed and the helmets were hung, legend of Greg Lloyd still lingers, whispers, in highlights, the fear that once swept through every quarterback in the league. Because on the gridiron, there were greats. There was Greg Lloyd, the man you simply learned to avoid. Avoid Lloyd wasn't just a sign, it was survival.